What is up, Knife World? Alex here, bringing you another custom knife video. Today on the Todd Fischer Senior Archangel. I want to kind of open this up with a little story. The Todd Fischer Senior Archangel, was probably my first high-end custom knife, and it was probably the knife that really kicked off my love for custom knives. Just to kind of touch on that, I think that Todd Fischer's work really embodied for me what a custom knife should be. At least it did at the time. And what I mean by that is it's hand fit and finished. It's got custom touches like hidden hardware. It has a nice custom pivot. And it can be made without the use of CNC. I think that Todd Fischer does use some CNC now, but it's not because he couldn't build it all by hand. It's just because it speeds up knives to the customer, which, I think that's okay. I mean, I would probably prefer all hand built, and when you're paying this kind of money, I think that you should expect, or you can ask for that. Maybe expect is not the right word. And I have no idea what he does and what he did and did not do with this all hand built versus what he did CNC wise. I'm not the first owner of this. I bought this used. This is a 2021-ish time frame piece. I found a photo on his Instagram of this piece. I think it was in 2021 at some point. And I wanted to talk about this because this is another knife that I bought again from my first wave of collecting. So if you haven't watched any of my other videos, essentially I got into knives around 2014-ish, where I started buying nicer knives like the Microtech DOC. And then I kind of went up the scale to buying all kinds of super high-end flashy knives, usually in exotic materials. And then I kind of got out of it to fund other hobbies, and then I had got back into it recently with some of my first kind of custom knives being in the 2022-ish time frame. So the first knife I got custom-wise was the Todd Fischer Archangel. It was a 4.25 inch, lightning strike carbon fiber, hidden hardware. I think it was a 20 CV blade, which is similar to like Bowler M390 or, I can't remember the other chemical clone, but it was basically that steel. And it had a similar backspacer where it was inset. The interior was anodized blue, and it did not have the skull crusher on it. So I did end up selling that one, and I have some mild gripes about my old one and some differences that I'd like to talk about this one. I would say my number one gripe about my old one is that the detent was pretty soft, basically non-existent. The action was super, super, super buttery smooth, and the bearings were perfectly dialed in, but it didn't have a whole lot of action. And you could kick the blade out pretty easily because it was so smooth and the blade was so heavy. So I wouldn't say that it wasn't a bad action. It just wasn't really like the detent that I wanted in a custom knife. And I didn't order that one straight from Todd either. So it's possible the customer who did order it or commission it asked for a soft detent. That's typically not my thing, but again, I didn't order it from him, so it's possible that the previous customer did ask for that. That being said, when I was going through my new wave of collecting here, I got the opportunity to buy this one. I guess I was kind of looking for another Archangel because it felt nostalgic to me. The knife is it's really awesome. I think it has great shape. It's Todd Fischer does a nice job putting it together. The reasons I bought the first one still apply to this one. And this one came along in a 3.75-inch blade, which I think is 3.64 inches of cutting edge. And that also fits the bill for my new knife requirements being under 4 inches. Again, moving to a state where 4-inch blade is my maximum length. So I need a knife that is under that. So this one came up, and I kind of wanted it. I just wanted another Archangel, and this one fit the bill. It's in a pretty much my desired configuration. I guess we'll start taking you around the knife just because. But as you can see, we are eggshelled titanium bolsters. You're gonna have to ignore my fingerprints. Carbon fiber, double bolster. This one is in liner lock. Liner lock maybe isn't my favorite configuration, but I'm good with it. It beats frame lock. I maybe like bolster lock a teeny tiny bit more. And it also has the machine satin Elmax blade, and this is an Elmax. Sorry for the smudges and stuff on it again, but what can I say? So as you can see, this is a slightly shorter one. I'm gonna put this off to the side, but there's a reason the Q36 is out. But another thing that excited me about this is that it's pretty much in a configuration that I love. So this was a knife that I did commission. This is actually made by Todd Fischer Sr.'s son, Todd Fischer Jr. This is a lash flipper model. So it's a little bit smaller. But as you can see, let me hide that knife over there. Let me pull these up next to each other. Hopefully my lighting is working out. But as you can see, they're both in double S bolsters, hidden hardware. They're both in marbled carbon fiber. Ironically, you can see the differences in what marbled carbon fiber became. This is a slightly older piece and piece of carbon fiber and older knife. This is again 2021. This is sometime in 2022. And I have no idea when Todd Fischer Sr. actually bought that carbon fiber. It could have been from even older. This is the newer stuff. To me, it kind of looks like shredded carbon fiber. I kind of hope you can see that, but it's definitely different. Like you see more waviness and softness in the individual pieces of carbon compared to this one, which looks more defined. It's hard to explain, but I hope you can see that. Like what you see is what it is. But the reason I got this out is because I commissioned this, and this is basically in the exact same configuration. And I thought that was super cool. Now I'm going to get out the pieces I was hiding earlier. The other thing is that I love this configuration. I like the titanium carbon fiber, titanium carbon fiber, titanium carbon fiber, titanium carbon fiber. As you can see, it exists on quite a few of my knives. Lee Williams Trident and RJ Martin Q36. I think I said that already. At least I said the Q36 maybe. But the Archangel came around. It was available. It was in a configuration I liked. I kind of already wanted one back in the collection, and so I bought it. It already had an edge on it. The previous owner put a wicked edge on it. However, his edge was really functional, but I didn't like the way it looked. It just wasn't very consistent. So I stropped this to a mirror. So it's kind of a hybrid edge between the original person who reprofiled it and myself who stropped it. I typically don't like the cutting performance of mirror edge. In my experience, they're okay, but I like having a little bit of toothiness at on my edges because I feel like it cuts most of my things better. I think in a mirror profiled edge, if you have a really good heat treat, you can get away with mirror because it still cuts well. But I think if you have kind of a crummy heat treat and you put a mirror on it, I think that you start to see the benefits of the mirror polish go away. Or the mirror polished edge. I guess I should be clear about that. So Todd Fischer, I know he does a lot of his own work. I assume he heat treated this himself, and I do trust that he would have put an excellent heat treat on this. So I'm not super worried about the performance of the mirror polish edge in this instance. As you can see, he's kind of got this I'm going to say like two-tone satin. It's not really two-tone satin, but basically he's got some satin that goes in this direction on the flats. Hopefully you can see that. And then he's kind of got the belt satin on the swedge and the belly of the blade. You can see this blade has a slight recurve to it, and it has a harpoon. Continuing to talk about that, it also has excellent jimping. In fact, this jimping is just about perfect. It is not too sharp, like where it's annoying on your hand, but it is extremely functional. I don't use, I would never, I don't think I would use this choking up to the harpoon, but I guess you could if you wanted to. Continuing around, it's got nice finishing pretty much all the way around, minus maybe one area. You can see right there underneath the flipper tab and between the lock bar, he's got like a little bit, it almost looks unfinished right there. It does have a little bit of lubricant on it, so you have to forgive me for that. I didn't perfectly clean it out, but hopefully you can still see the kind of rough passes by the machine where it left some consistent scratches right there. I gotta say that I don't remember that being the case on my first Archangel, and this doesn't really bother me. I'd say it's just peculiar. I don't know. I don't know why that wouldn't be finished similar to the rest of it, but it is what it is. The other thing, and it's probably going to be kind of hard to see color-wise, but if you look in the jimping, you can see a teeny tiny bit of color where what I am going to assume is the heat treat did not get satined out of there. And it's certainly a choice. He must have done it intentionally, because he definitely could have like stuck some sandpaper or a small file in there to even it out. But I guess he just wanted to, or maybe the customer requested it. Again, didn't commission this knife. Continuing around, I want to talk about that beautiful pivot. Again, sorry for the dirty knife. But this has got to be one of my favorite custom pivots, partly because it's nostalgic. Again, Todd Fischer was Sr. was one of the first custom pieces that I owned, and mine also had a similar pivot to that. I love this pivot. Let me pull out some other pivots that are good and talk about it. So I chose the Walter Randolph Wyvern to bring out and talk about the pivot. This is also a pivot that's handmade. This is not exactly off the shelf. And you can tell because it's got slight milling lines in each three hole, or each one of these three pocket things. You know, I don't know if Walter makes this pivot. Somebody makes it. I don't think they're exactly off the shelf. But point being why I picked this one is there's a lot of custom makers that mill their pivots like this. They basically have the same idea where it's got three pockets and three kind of, you know, this peace sign looking thing, where it splits the circle into three equal parts. There's nothing wrong with this pivot, and I like that it's custom, and different makers will do different anodizing or two-tone colors or more than that. You can see Walter Randolph, he put this pivot collar around there. So there's a lot of ways to make this pivot pretty interesting. But to me, this is not as interesting only because I feel like a lot of makers do something similar. And again, custom pivot is a custom pivot. Like, how much can you complain when you're getting something handmade hardware by a maker? But when I look at this, this is special. It's different. Nobody else is making a pivot like this, and I like that. It looks attractive. Obviously, you're not going to be servicing that by yourself. I don't take apart my custom knives, so that doesn't matter to me. But I guess if that's a thing for you, there you go. I like that pivot. That's all that to being said, I dig the pivot. I'll put this away. Continuing around, let's talk about fit and finish for a second while we're transitioning to the carbon fiber. Fit and finish on this knife is pretty good. I already talked about finishing a little bit, but let's talk about fit. Just like on my first Archangel, I do not notice a transition between the materials. It's done perfectly. It's blended well. It's blended on the top really well. I'm extremely happy with the way that the way that you fit these handles together. It's also got really wonderful contouring. I'm really happy with that. Back, just about as good, or just as good. I don't have any complaints there. While I'm on carbon fiber, I know I talk about how I like it a lot, but I want to discuss a downside to carbon fiber. If you look right there, you can see what looks like a small divot in the carbon fiber. And that's not a defect from Mr. Fischer. That is a void in the carbon fiber. And you can see voids in carbon fiber I hope you can see it. There's also a couple of voids on the top of the scale, and maybe if I rotate it around, these are really hard to see, but you can see a couple of small voids. And maybe I'll pull out the lash again. I don't see a whole lot on this side. Yeah, okay, you can see a little bit right under the clip. Right there, you can see a little tiny hole. And it's not a defect in the maker necessarily. It's really a defect in the carbon fiber manufacturing process. There's more than one way to make carbon fiber. I'm not an expert on how to make marbled carbon fiber or other types of carbon fiber. That's not the kind of work I do. But my understanding is there's kind of two primary ways to do it. The first way you can do it is basically by taking sheets of, I'm going to call it fabric because it like bends like fabric, and it's the carbon side of fiber, and it is basically woven strands of carbon, and then you lay it down onto or into a mold, and then you put epoxy over it or another binder in the matrix, and then you put another sheet of carbon over it, and then more epoxy, and then another more epoxy, and you keep doing that over and over again until you get the thickness that you want. And then you let the epoxy cure, and then you cut it and finish it into the shape that you want. The other process is basically you put you do this same starting process. You put the carbon and epoxy onto itself over and over and over again into some kind of mold, and then you put all of it into a bag, and then you vacuum out all of the air so that you vacuum seal the bag. And then sometimes you put it into a heater or a furnace or a kiln or something to heat the epoxy for its curing process. And basically, I'm saying all of this to say that the process of laying down the sheets of carbon and putting in the epoxy can create tiny little air bubbles as you complete the process. I think it's possible in both kinds of process, but I think it's more common without the vacuum sealed bags because I think the vacuum sealing does a better job of pulling out those air bubbles. Again, I'm not in the carbon fiber manufacturing business. I could be speaking out of term a little bit. But point being is that carbon fiber can have defects, especially in these like woven patterns. It's possible to see defects. So even if Todd Fischer does everything perfect, you still have an opportunity to get those little tiny defects. Does it bother me? A little bit, but evidently not too much because as you can see, it's still one of my favorite configurations. So I guess that's another downside to carbon fiber that I probably haven't represented fairly, but since I have this knife and it's kind of obvious, I want to point that out, that it's possible to get defects. So continuing around, you can see the backspacer. He's got this inverted gear pattern. Looks nice to me. Fit and finishing is great. As per usual, can't feel the difference between the materials. I do want to talk a little bit about the glass breaker. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a really big glass breaker guy, but I've come to appreciate this glass breaker. This is a smaller knife, and the glass breaker gives you just a tiny bit more handle to fill in your hand. I don't know that I would have needed it, but it hasn't bothered me. It's not too pointy to where it would hurt you. Like there's no sharp edges on it. I probably wouldn't smash this against a car window or something if you needed to like rescue somebody or get into a window or whatever the deal is. I think there are better tools than titanium to do that, but I suppose it's kind of a artistic thing over anything else. Moving on, you've got Todd Fischer's clip. This looks very similar to my previous clip. I like this clip. It's super functional in the pocket. The tension on this one is just right, so I'm dig that. And this is a liner lock, as you can see, lock up really nice. Might be hard to see. You can kind of see it there on the edge, but Todd Fischer also does this perlage. It's a watch finish. I've also heard it called engine turning, although I don't know why it's called that. And it's basically a process that finishes the interior of the titanium, and it makes it look pretty nice. Let me see if I can get out a light to help see that a little bit better. So you can kind of see what I mean there. You can also see some of his hidden hardware in there. But you can see the perlages on both sides all the way in. You can also see his signature right there. Todd T. Fischer. Sorry, I'm looking through the viewfinder, so it's a little hard to see everything. But yep, he signs it in there. I prefer that signature or maker's mark over anything else because I like the clean blade. And so yeah, and now we're back to the other side and the blade again. So let's talk about just kind of how this knife feels and what I think about it. Excuse me. This knife feels pretty good in the hand. I have medium, large hands, and this knife is doable. It is cramped in here for me. If you have bigger hands than I do, your pinky is probably going to be hanging off, and to me, this is not a comfortable grip. I can almost just barely squeeze by and hold the knife like this, which is not really how I use knives, but for me, this is kind of a benchmark on how it should feel. I also do have where my middle finger sits on those finger cutouts. They're pretty rounded, and I don't grip the knife super tight, so that doesn't super bother me. The flipper tab does act as a bit of a finger guard, so you can certainly get into that and use that if you need to. This choil, it's not sharp all the way to the back, so I guess you could kind of put your finger in there, but it's not really comfortable. And this knife is small enough to where I don't see where you do any like super fine cutting like that, so maybe stylistic over practical. And then the reason I started this video out with the R.J. Martin and the Todd Fischer Senior Archangel. Let's get into that. I'm going to put these two to the side for just a second. Why were these two out? Well, when I did the R.J. Martin video, and I did it pretty recently, I commented a question about price. The Q36 has gone up in price quite a bit. And my question was, is it still worth it? Especially being that the R.J. Martin is not the only knife to have a phenomenal double-click action. And as you can hear, this action is incredible. It's smooth, it's got great acoustics, it jumps out at you, it's effortless. Honestly, this action is incredible. But I brought up the proposition that R.J. Martin is not the only knife maker to produce knives with great acoustics. And I really wanted to find a way to not flip the whole video until I wanted to talk about the action, but I couldn't do that. But if you listen closely, did you hear that? Also, a beautiful double-click action. And the flipper tab is also pretty minimal, at least compared to the R.J. Martin. I don't really care about large flipper tabs. As I've mentioned in other videos, it doesn't bother me all that much. But flipper tab is a little bit trimmer on the Todd Fischer, so you can do, or makers can do, a nice acoustic sound even with not a big flipper tab. I think this is a good example of that. And the reason I brought out this knife and this knife is because these knives are priced similarly from the maker. Again, I did not buy either of these knives from the maker, so I'm going off of what other people told me. But both of these knives are sitting in the mid-3s if you were to try and order them as of ish now, or around now. Again, subject to change in the future. But the Q36 uses a lot of CNC, and Todd Fischer, to my understanding, is mostly by hand. Again, I know he uses CNC, and I don't know for what on everything, but these knives are priced similarly. They have pretty similar acoustics. to me, I think the value proposition on a hand-built knife, which I'm assuming Todd Fischer has more handwork into it, just because I don't think he uses as much CNC. To me, this value proposition is really, really strong. The action on this is incredible. It sounds amazing. In fact, if my old one had action like this, I don't think I ever would have been able to sell it because this action is so good. It's so good. The Q36 is maybe a little bit more comfortable in the hand for me because I've got bigger hands and it doesn't have that kind of grip, the big choil in the back grip there. The flipper tab is also maybe a touch easier to find, but as far as like the acoustics and the action actually goes, they're pretty similar. I'm not gonna lie, they're very similar. One other thing I wanted to talk about is some critiques of the Archangel. It's got some sharper edges than I remember. Like for instance, the lock bar, it is chamfered and you can kind of see the light dancing off of the chamfer there, but it kind of broke my fingers back in. Like I got calluses again when I really started playing with it. And same with the flipper tab. It's not sharp, it really isn't, but I definitely had some sore fingers after fidgeting with it for a while. And that kind of brings me back to another appreciation point for the Vanquish, because the Vanquish has been the daily driver for a while now. The Vanquish has like no hot spots, and you notice that. It doesn't bother you at all in the hand. There are no hot spots. And the reason that I even had sore fingers is because I'd been carrying the Vanquish for a couple of months before I had bought the Archangel, and my hands kind of lost the calluses that typically come with a lot of fidgeting with knives. And so like I don't remember the edges being sharp on my other one being a problem, but because the Marsh is so good, I noticed it, and it was an interesting experience. So I guess a criticism is that it's got some sharper edges than I remember. Now, Todd Fischer Sr., he probably has, working, knife building hands, and he may not even notice that. And again, it took me a couple of days, and now, like, I don't notice it anymore either, because I have back to my normal kind of knife flipping hands, because I've been playing with this one quite a bit since I bought it. But that's definitely something that I noticed. The other kind of weird oddity, and I've never noticed another knife with it until I kind of got this one, is the amount of load that detent has versus the amount of travel the blade does on this is actually kind of nuts. So take a look at this and watch the tip of the blade compared to the handle. You can see right now it's nice and flush, just as the design suggests. It's perfect. Now watch how much I can load the flipper tab and how much the tip actually comes out. Check that out. It's still in the detent there. Look how far that blade comes out. My goodness, like you could definitely like grab the edge of that, which is kind of weird. And I didn't notice it for a long time because when you typically flip knives, like for me, my thumb sits over the edge. And like, it's not something that I think about. Like the flipper tab, it has to move a little bit in order to get the blade to move out, right? You can see it moves maybe a teeny tiny bit, a little 1/10 of a millimeter. The edge of the blade, like, because there's so much more blade on this side of the pivot than on this side of the pivot, a little teeny tiny bit of movement here has a lot more movement here just based on geometry. And I was like, that's kind of strange. But I want to point out that that's also not the only knife that does it. Check this out. RJ Martin Q36. See that? See that? Hard not to open it, but it also has a little bit of wiggle on the detent before you open it. So I don't want to make it seem like no other knives have that. I don't know why I noticed it with this knife. again, action on both of these is great. It's just something that I noticed with the Todd Fischer Sr. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it has something to do with how the detent ball geometry is compared to the blade. It may have something to do with that it's kind of a light switch action versus this is a push button action. So like when I do it to this, like you really can't see. And I'm trying to light switch this so you can see it. If you push button it, you never do. You'll never see any wiggle. I really don't see a whole lot of wiggle with the Marsh, but I do see it with more light switchy flippers. Hit the tripod, sorry about that. So that's been another kind of interesting point. I don't think that, again, I don't think that detracts a whole lot from the knife, because again, even some of the best flippers, which I have several of the best flippers in my collection out, it's not the only one that does that. So I don't want to say that that's a criticism to custom knives. I think there's a lot that goes into why it might do that geometry wise. So taking a look at these two and saying that they are inferior to, say, the Marsh because they have more detent play as you open it, to me doesn't really make any sense, because the design of these is pretty similar and they both have it, compared to this where it's more of a push button style. It's just kind of apples to oranges. And the other thing is, I'm going to guess the reason it does that is because of the detent ball geometry and compared to the blade. And I'm going to guess that because these two are light switch and they have heavier detents, as the detent ball kind of like pulls out of the pocket for the detent ball, right? That's what creates the detent in the blade. I'm betting that there's a bit of play between that system. I'm guessing just the way it actuates, there's just more play to it as you load up on it, and then it pops out. And you can hear the detent is crisp. It makes two defined clicks. The first one is the detent ball breaking, and the second one is the blade locking up. It's the same. It's not that the detent ball is lazily done or anything like that. I'm not trying to give you that impression. It's just that I think that system just has more play in it. All right, I've rambled on about that plenty, and this is now becoming a 32-minute video here, so I'm going to try and cut this off now, but I just wanted to share my thoughts and my Archangel story. I'm really glad to have this one in the collection. This one has everything that I wish my old one had as far as action goes, and it fits in the size that I need a knife to be right now, so I don't see myself getting rid of this, because it's kind of, again, the knife that got me into customs. The action is incredible. Fit and finish is everything you'd want out of it. I mean, it's serious competition. And I think you can even get on Todd Fischer's books now if you want to. So I like that. I would definitely recommend scooping one up if this style is for you. He has different sizes. His 4-inch model, I feel like, is a lot wider. The handle on this feels a lot slimmer. Dirk Werning has a video comparing a similarly sized one to larger Archangels, and you can see how much bigger they are. And your hand definitely feels that. I remember that from my old one. This one feels very trim. The other ones definitely have more bulk to them. I think that's really a preference thing. If you like bigger, bulkier knives, the 4-inch, 4¼ inch is probably the way to go. If you need a trim knife or you prefer a smaller knife, 3.75-inch blade might be the way to go. So you got options there. With this action, I don't know what he did to perfect that action, but I don't see how you could be upset with this knife. It is really good. It is really good, and I'm super excited to have it back in the collection. All right, I think that's all I have for you guys today, so thank you for hanging in there with me. And if you guys want to see anything else, let me know. I have another knife or two on the way, or when I say on the way, in the works. So as they come along, I will record some more videos. And thank you for joining, everybody. Have a good one.